developing deep self-confidence that transcends all the different areas in your life, allowing you to essentially come into alignment between the person that you feel like you are on the inside and the person that you're being on the outside. And when those two visions come into alignment, when the person that you're being is the same as the person that you perceive yourself to be, that's when you're able to truly accomplish things that seem impossible. And that's when real opportunity opens up.
I study the patterns of the universe.
That's just in the brain.
Virtual your mind. Talking about your life, fundamental principles, philosophy.
What is and what is not true.
Those who know themselves.
Being better every single day.
Hey there. Welcome to another episode of the Think Grow podcast, where personal development meets real life. I am your host, Ruben Chavez, and I explore a variety of topics on the show with thought leaders, creators, scientists, psychologists, entrepreneurs, all sorts of interesting people with the goal to bring you different perspectives that you can use to enrich your mind and improve your life in whatever way you see fit. Today, my guest is Daniel DiPiazza. And if you don't know who Daniel is, he is a best-selling author. He's the founder of several companies, a couple of which are Rich 20-something, and more recently, Alpha Mentorship. And he's a very successful entrepreneur. Daniel is also a good friend of mine. And so he's been on the show before, and we've talked about meta habits and kind of these actions you can do that are big bangs for your buck and have a positive cascade effect on a lot of different areas of your life. And so that we talked about that about a year ago, and that was coming off the tail end of his book, Rich 20-something. Since then, Daniel has really made a lot of transitions in his life and in his business, and I just watched him go through a transformation of sorts. And not just like what he does in business, but of like in his consciousness too. He's thinking about different things and he's wanting to talk about different things. And so in this episode, we get into some really fun areas. We discuss what he calls invisible structures, which are subtle systems of control that kind of run our lives. We talk about what he calls paradigms, pendulums, and programs. And these are three forms of emotional and psychological control that hold us back from doing the things that we want to do in our lives. And so we kind of unpack what it is that these consist of and kind of how to circumvent them and how to lessen their negative impact on us. So I thought our conversation was really thought-provoking and what he had to say was really insightful. This is all part of a speaking tour. This material is something that he's going on a worldwide speaking tour talking about. And in fact, I think he's already started that. And as you're listening to this, he's probably halfway across the world talking to audiences about these very topics. And ultimately, this is also material that is going to be in his new book that he will be releasing here in the near future, which we don't have a date for yet. But you are getting a sneak preview into the material of this book, which I think is cool. I mean, I love when I get to talk with people who are still forming their ideas about a book that they're going to be writing. I mean, this is a very important part of the process, I think, as a writer, is to talk about what it is that you're trying to teach people. If you're a writer, if you're a teacher, if you're an educator of any sort, thinking out loud about some of the topics that you want to communicate is a very useful way to clarify your thoughts. And that's kind of what we did here. So hope you enjoy it. I think many of you will find our conversation quite interesting, quite useful, and very practical. So let me know what you think. Here's Daniel DiPiazza. Daniel DiPiazza, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. Thank you for being here, dude. It's been a while since we've caught up.
Well, that's because you had a baby. Well, you didn't have it.
I didn't have it.
A baby was had that you contributed to.
You get the pictures I sent you?
Yes.
What do you think? Looks like me?
Totally. And what's your number one lesson you've learned as a father so far?
That I can exist on less sleep than I thought was possible. That's the first thing. But beyond that, I mean, it's almost cliche. I don't know if it's cliche to you because maybe you haven't been exposed to the world of parenting as much as I have, but there's the idea that kids teach you more than you teach them, but it's like, it is so true, dude. Like, they don't know anything, but they're teaching you things all the time about yourself. It's such an interesting thing that you can learn from a being that doesn't necessarily have quote unquote knowledge in the way that we have it, It's because you're trying to do this really challenging task. And in doing that, you're learning about yourself, So
I don't think that's cliche at all. I think the biggest lessons are underneath the cliches,
Oh, preach! I'm so excited to hear you say that, dude, because something that kind of irks me is when people like I'll read like a 1-star review on Amazon of like one of my favorite books, and they're like, this is not groundbreaking at all. Like a personal development book, right? Like this is not groundbreaking at all. This is like full of, stuff that you should already know. And then over here on an Instagram post, I'll see someone comment on a kind of, like maybe one could say a cliche, but like a quote that has some wisdom in it, but that's been posted many times. And they'll be like, oh, this is such a platitude. Oh, this is such a cliche. And my thought process is always like, are you using the cliches? Like, are you actually like incorporating the cliches into your life? Because if you're continually looking for new groundbreaking things, especially when it comes to like old human problems, you know what I mean? Like, but what personal development covers, then you're missing the point. It's about the fundamentals. It's about the old things, right?
That's why we have these foundational texts, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all these different really ancient texts that say a lot of the same things, where there's all these different overlaps. And you look at all the self-development books that we can read over the years, and all of them have these really obvious intersections. And it's because the fabric of human wisdom runs very deep, but it presents itself sometimes in ways that seem obvious. And it's only once you expose yourself to the truth of those things and you experience maybe some pain associated with something where you have to then go back to the old wisdom that you see how true it is.
Yes. And it becomes, at that point, it's no longer a cliche. It's no longer an abstract thing. It's like you're living it, and it's very real. It's more visceral.
Yeah. And I think that we get distracted looking for like the piece of advice that's going to be so revolutionary that it will finally make a difference to us, when the advice and all the stuff that we need is pretty much already out there, and we're not either digging deep enough or we're not taking the time to absorb. I mean, a good example is like, I have my stack of books here, and, everyone wants to read a lot of books, and I've done, read tons of books too. And, at one point I was reading like, I'll read 2 books a week or whatever. But, what if you just took Ray Dalio's book, you just read Principles, and you just absorbed this? This is really, you could read this whole book. And I know I'm on video right now. You guys can't see it, but like, this is a long book. It's like maybe 600 pages, maybe 500 pages. You could read just this one book over the period of 2 years. And if you just got what was in here, it would be worth you skimming through those 40 books that you thought you were getting something from.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, books are such a great investment, because the way I see it, even if you take one piece of wisdom that you actually incorporate and integrate into your life from a book that you spend $15, $20 on, is totally worth it. Like, that book may have 20 to 30 pieces of wisdom that it tries to impart. And if you can get it all, cool. But even if you just take one thing away from that one book, and you read like 20 books over the course of a year, it's like, that's meaningful, rather than like, well, it's just quality over quantity, essentially, right?
That's important. Yeah. Application is really the important part.
Application, man. Speaking of application, you are talking a lot about these kind of principles and other things like that on a new speaking tour that you're coming on. April 20th, obviously. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's got to be April 20th.
420.
420. So tell me about this speaking tour, man. Like, what is this? Because I really actually haven't spoken with you a lot about this, and I think this is as good a venue as any to expound upon what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was having a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a breakdown, but like just over the past 2 years, I just have had to really continually question my beliefs and question my path. So like we met in the beginning of 2015, and like it was like June 2015. It was in the summer. It was in Vegas.
When I met you in the summer.
Yep, that's how it happened. And you were just about to turn 30, I believe. And I was like, damn, you're old.
Are you 30 yet? You're 30 already, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be 30.
In like a few days.
A few days, yeah, a couple weeks.
Okay.
So at that point, like I was probably just about peaking, if not maybe another year, but just about peaking at the height of my career as an infopreneur. Basically just selling online courses. And all that stuff is fun. But over the past 2 years, since my book has come out, and I kind of closed that chapter of my life where I am no longer interested in just talking about making money because, well, it's really only one piece of who I am. But then as I decided to close that chapter, I thought, okay, well, what's really important to me? And how do I talk about the things that are really meaningful to me? And during that time period, I went through a lot of really significant changes. I went through some really significant deaths, some really significant moves. I did a lot of different personal development work in like plant medicine and meditation and martial arts and all these different things that are developing me. And so, if I look back at my book, even the book came out when I was 28. It was written when I was 27. It was conceived when I was 23 to 26. So now going to be 31 in a few weeks here, the person who conceived that book at 23 is a totally different person.
I feel like I'm in one of those. I felt like I'm one of those periods for the past few years. Like I honestly feel very different from 1 week to the next, even. And so,
totally,
I've been watching you over the past couple of years, and you have changed a lot. I mean, I've seen you go through a transformation, and so I did want to ask you about that because last time you were on the podcast was roughly a year ago. And I think I caught you at the tail end of that journey because we were still talking about your book a little bit, the Rich 20-something book. And we were still talking about kind of business and how to, well, I guess we weren't talking so much about the infopreneur stuff, but we were still talking about things surrounding that. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you think has been the biggest change between that book, Rich 20-something, and then your new book that you're working on right now?
I mean, look, business is still a part of my personality and it's part of my like deep interests. But what I've learned is that you can't improve a business without improving the leader first. And so that's really kind of what Alpha Mentorship has become. Our motto is improve the leader, improve the business. I think a lot of people who come into this space trying to teach business start with strategies and tactics. And that's great. It's part of the process. But oftentimes in the process of improving the business, the leader gets left behind because there's no development of the person behind the business. So going through my own journey of developing my person, I realized how important that aspect of entrepreneurship was. Actively developing yourself. And it doesn't just mean studying, sales tactics. It's more about, can you do the work on yourself to be able to be a self leader? Can you lead yourself? And so that is equally as important as, do you know how to run the numbers and sell? And so that combination has been the catalyst for the new company, Alpha Mentorship. And Wielding Power is the name of the new book, the name of the speaking tour, and that the focus of that IP, the IP around that concept is developing deep self-confidence that transcends all the different areas in your life, allowing you to essentially come into alignment between the person that you feel like you are on the inside and the person that you're being on the outside. And when those two visions come into alignment, when the person that you're being is the same as the person that you perceive yourself to be, that's when you really create the energy, create the power to be able to make the things happen that you want in your life. And when you're able to match the person who you are in your head with the person who you're being on the outside, that's when you're able to truly accomplish things that seem impossible. And that's when real opportunity opens up. But most people are so obsessed with either being someone that they're not, or obsessing about something that they've never even attempted to try, that those two never come into alignment, and they wonder why they're never fulfilled.
Manifesting what's on the inside on the outside, essentially.
I almost shy away to say manifest, because I feel like yes, it is manifestation, but that term gets a little overused.
I know. It can get, depending on the context that it's used, it can be a little bit woo-woo.
Yeah.
So part of this book, I think, as I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong, is talking about these invisible structures that kind of hold us back from, I presume, from doing this, from kind of expressing our full potential. What are these invisible structures? Talk about them, elaborate on them.
So, okay, let's first back it up a little bit, because we're talking about power, right? The way I define power is determined by the speed with which you can declare something's possible and move that thing from possibility to reality. So that really is a definition of manifestation, right? Saying, this is what I want to accomplish, and the speed at which you accomplish that, you're able to accomplish that, is representative of your power. And that's a concept by Tracy Goss, who wrote this book called The Last Word on Power. And so, imagine you think to yourself, I want a Ferrari. This is like a very simplistic, dumb example, but like, I want a Ferrari. If that Ferrari rolls over your foot in 30 seconds, it's pretty powerful, If it takes you 20 years to get it, not as powerful of a mindset.
So it's speed. You're defining power more as like the speed with which you can create the things you want to create.
Yes. And that speed is determined by the clarity of the vision plus the action behind that. Obviously, there are many factors involved, but generally speaking, we're talking about the speed with which you can say something is possible and then see that in the real world. And then kind of thinking about how that interacts with the mind, there's a great quote by James Allen. He said, "Mind is the power that molds and makes, and man is mind. And evermore he takes the tool of thought, and shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but a looking glass." It's a deep one. But yeah, environment is but a looking glass. And what he's saying is that what you see in front of you is just a reflection of what's on the inside, which is, again, a cliche concept, but really, truly start to think about what that means. Brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but a looking glass. And so when I think about power, and I think about really the idea of what it means to become more powerful, these types of concepts are what is leading my thought process. And through this process, it's revealed to me, and I've put this up on IG a few times, but that your future is not a fixed destination. It's not a fixed point in time that you're moving towards, but it's a fluid and a dynamic event that moves towards you at the speed of your intentions. Meaning that, we're so used to thinking of our lives in a linear way where, and we plot that out because of school, right? Like, I go to school, I get these grades, and this is my career, and then I have this family and 2.3 kids, and this is how it's going to all roll out. We assume that there's like this finish line that we're going to get to. But what if there was no set finish line? What if every action and every intention behind that action created a new permutation of an infinite number of possibilities that exist for you, and that the steps that you take, both internally and externally, change your destiny and the outcome of your future based on what you're doing and thinking? That's a new paradigm. That's literally a paradigm shift. And when you think about the world from that perspective, you start to take back the power. You start to realize that what I'm doing and thinking are actively shaping what's in front of me, and that I have the choice to step into a new future based on how I'm being and how I'm operating. This is very Joe Dispenza. Dispenza talks about this. He talks about feeling into your future and allowing yourself to literally project yourself into a future version of yourself to feel the emotions, to change your physiology, to change your state, to change the outcome of the actions that you take. Like really, literally reverse engineering your future, which I highly recommend you guys check out Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't. I've been recommended it several times though. But so
baby,
I'll get on it, man. I'll get on it.
Got to.
I was
gonna say I went to one of his seminars. I went to an 8-day seminar in Toronto, and he tranced us. We were doing like 12-hour days with him, where he was doing lectures on quantum physics, and then in between that, he was dropping us into deep meditative states with guided meditation. This man is a true real life wizard, and it was nuts.
Wow. Okay, so you just mentioned that I don't know how I can't remember how you put it, but like kind of projecting yourself on into the future in a sense. Can you give an example of that?
So there's visualization, which we've all thought about visualization, and that's kind of like a common tool in the New Age tool book, in the personal development tool book, visualization. But I think one thing that gets overlooked is really understanding how to create the sensation of the visualization and of the event happening in real time. So it's not as much visualizing, like let's say your goal is that you want to make, X amount of dollars. You want to get a raise at work. You can visualize your boss coming into the office and giving you a raise. You can visualize maybe even, a new amount of money in your bank account. But I think what Dispenza is referring to, and what I really have found has worked for me, is creating the emotional intensity inside of you that you would experience when you're getting the thing that you want. And really being able to tap into what that emotion feels like. That emotional state causes a physiological and a chemical change in your body. Just as we know that scientists have done studies that show that like when you're feeling gratitude, it's releasing dopamine. It's actually changing the balance of your neurotransmitters. It's decreasing stress levels. And so the idea is living into that future emotion and using that emotion to essentially project yourself into this new reality by living as you would live when you're in that space that you want to be, and closing the gap. Because first of all, let's be straight up. The reason why you want to get a raise is because you want money, because the money is going to give you security. The security is going to make you happy and fulfilled. And there's like a chain of emotions. But you can skip past that physical part and you can move right to the emotion. And if you can get to the emotion first, you become, on a very real level, more resourceful, more easygoing, much more creative. If you skip past whatever you think the physical barrier is and go right to the emotional state that you're trying to achieve, it makes it easier for you to then close the gap between where you are and where you want to go. And it seems very like strange, and it doesn't seem like it's not a linear process. Again, we're so used to looking at the world from, okay, I'll do these actions in the physical world and I'll accomplish this result. But what if there was a paradigm shift where you could skip some of the physical actions, go right to the emotional result, and then work backwards from the emotional result through the actions?
The emotion, not the thing, is the point.
Yes.
Like the point of the whole thing is we want anything because it's going to make us feel a certain way.
Yes.
And so if we can get to that emotion first, then we can kind of reverse engineer what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, because think about it. like if you for instance, you're an entrepreneur, you know this, like we'll go through phases where we're like, okay, I really have to make some money right now. And that the need to make money, you know this, the need to make money causes anxiety and stress. And from a place of anxiety and stress, it's very hard to be creative and resourceful, because that's literally stress is a constrictive, restrictive state, and creativity requires open-mindedness, abundance, and freedom. So those two are at odds. Now, if you could skip the restrictive state of lack and go right to the feeling of having accomplished the thing, then you'll be able to work backwards and think, what would I need to do from this state to create what I need to create?
So how do you do that? And how have you done this in your own life?
Well, I mean, I think this is a good way to think about invisible structures. Invisible structures are essentially mental and emotional energy systems that keep us focused on things outside of ourselves. when you're looking to change your future and your destiny, essentially, this is an internal process, and it's going to require energy for you to focus on yourself, for you to create the emotional state you're going to need to create to move forward. All this stuff sounds kooky. I get it. Like, in a lot of ways, I'm a cynical asshole. So it's not like I don't understand that this sounds weird. Okay. I'm just telling you from my experience what works. And especially coming from an entrepreneur's perspective, it takes a lot of emotional energy to do this. If you doubt that, then you haven't done this before. It takes an incredible amount of emotional fortitude and resourcefulness and resilience and just a little bit of insanity to be able to do this. So we're going to have to operate in a different way. In order to be able to bring the energy back in order to be able to wield the power, in order to be able to improve the leader, improve the business, we have to first observe and adapt to these invisible structures. And these are these mental and emotional energy systems that keep us focused on the outside world. And we're going to have to shed these systems, or at least be able to recognize when they show up to be able to take our power back. And so there are essentially three invisible structures, three primary invisible structures.
These are structures that hold us back from accomplishing what it is we want to accomplish, from creating what we want to create.
Yes. And they come at three different levels, three levels of depth. Paradigms, pendulums, and programs. Paradigms are essentially the broadest structure, and they're essentially the belief structures. And I'll go specifically into this in a bit, but paradigms are essentially the belief structures. So like the things that you're taught early on. The paradigms are essentially the invisible lines, the boxes that we stay inside that we're told never to cross outside. So I'll give you examples of those in a minute. The next one will be pendulums. So pendulums are essentially emotional forms of control. And these are probably the most polarizing of the invisible structures. And then there are programs, and programs are behavioral specific. So they're more granular and detailed. That have to do with what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So then if you back it up and you look at paradigms, which is the broadest of the structures, these are essentially cognitive frameworks of mutually held beliefs shared by members of a culture or group of people. Again, these are like the invisible lines that we stay inside. And part of this comes from, or one way to recognize these is whenever you hear someone say you should do something, right? You should go to college. You should, dress a certain way. You should watch this TV show. Some of these might be benign and not that serious, but they're paradigms that we're stuck inside. And one way to look at this is what Tracy Goss calls the universal human paradigm, the UHP. And essentially the universal human paradigm it's a fundamental archetypal paradigm that all humans are ingrained with, and that it's so slippery that we often can't even detect that it's operating in the background. And the universal human paradigm operates like this. And it says, there's a way things should be. And when things are that way, all is right in the world. And when things are not that way, everything is wrong, right? There's a way things should be. And when there's something wrong when the thing's not happening, there's something wrong with me, them, or it. If you think about it, the way that we operate is always, even on a very subconscious level, binary. This is right, this is wrong. This should happen, that shouldn't happen, with things that we think are very clear. This person shouldn't have died. This president shouldn't have gotten elected. I shouldn't have hurt my back. Even though we know that we can't control everything, we still operate on a shouldn't basis. This shouldn't have happened. Why did that happen? And it's that paradigm that causes suffering. And playing into this game accepts a very narrow worldview where you only survive if things work out as they should, even though really there is no way things should work out. And we end up running our life against this program and of should and should not. And according to who? Who is the should according to? We're making this up. And it causes a lot of stress. The way that you examine this paradigm and the way that you examine really all paradigms is first, there's essentially three declarations that you make in order to be able to step outside this paradigm. And this is a thought exercise as much as a practical exercise. The first thing you say is, what's possible is what I say is possible. So within paradigms, often we don't even consider that there are other possibilities for how we would interact with the world. One simple one right now is like, I need to be on social media. That's a paradigm. there is a world that you operate in where you're making just as much money, where you're just as fulfilled, and your business is running just as well, where you don't spend as much time on Instagram. And I'm speaking to myself too, just FYI.
Cal Newport is in this world, right? Cal Newport
Yes.
basically shattered this paradigm with his book Deep Work.
Yes. And his most recent book, I feel like, wasn't as good as Deep Work because Deep Work pretty much covered it.
Yeah, it's basically you don't have to be on social media to produce good work and to be discovered.
Right.
I mean, there's more to that, but his view on social media is that he lives that. He doesn't have social media, or he doesn't use it in the way that most entrepreneurs or authors do. So anyway, that's just one example that popped into my head about a paradigm that somebody broke.
And it's a deep, deep paradigm. And the problem with paradigms is because it's a structure that it depends on mutually held beliefs. The more people believe it, the harder it is to step outside the paradigm because it seems objectively true, but it's not.
That's what Yuval Noah Harari calls, I think, an intersubjective reality. Like, money is not objectively true, but because we believe it subjectively in an intersubjective way, it's a very real reality for us. But objectively, it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah, it means nothing.
Yeah, but these are very powerful forces, these intersubjective realities that we all kind of agree upon that exist. Because when people collectively agree that something exists, that's a super powerful force. I mean, he makes the case that it's the reason why humans had reached dominion over the earth as opposed to, monkeys or ants or something. But anyway, I digress.
No, it's all super relevant. And so the way you step outside of that is you say, what's possible is what I say is possible. I can create my own paradigms even while living inside of other ones. And then the next piece of that is you declare, I am the stand I take, which basically means you have to take a stand for who you are and where your beliefs lie, because the stand that you take for yourself is who you are. This goes back to matching inside with outside. You can't say that you're one way and do another thing and have those two match up. So you are the stand that you take. If you say, hey, I don't need to exist in the world of social media, or I don't want to exist in this way, and then you continue to use it in the same way, then you're not being the stand that you take. And then you're not going to be able to break through the paradigm. And this isn't criticism of people this isn't like a social media user criticism. I'm addicted to it, and I know this. This isn't criticizing people who choose to stay in that paradigm. It's more like recognizing where those things are and deciding how you want to operate.
On this show, I often focus on the mental and emotional aspects of living well. But physical health is just as important. You can't think, grow, or prosper to the fullest unless you have your health in check. 4 Sigmatic products have really helped me with this part of my life. There are very few companies whose products I recommend without reservation, but 4 Sigmatic is definitely one of them. I've been using their superfood supplements for years, long before they became a sponsor of this podcast. 4 Sigmatic specializes in mushroom-based drinks that promote immunity, energy, longevity, and just help us live all-around healthier lives. As far as what I'd recommend, they make a wide variety of different blends, but there's 2 that I'll recommend to you. The first is their Coffee with Cordyceps blend. Cordyceps is a medicinal mushroom, and it's been shown to support energy, stamina, and athletic performance, so it's perfect before a workout or during a study session or any time you need some extra focus. And all their coffee is 100% organic, and it actually tastes like coffee, not like mushrooms in case you were worried. The second product I'll recommend is probably my favorite supplement I've taken in a very long time. It's not a coffee blend, it's actually a blend of 10 different adaptogenic herbs. What are adaptogenic herbs? In a nutshell, they are plants that have been traditionally consumed, often for thousands of years, to help people adapt to various forms of stress. They help minimize fatigue, promote focus, and just increase general well-being. So I've been mixing this blend into my morning smoothies for a while now, and I've been amazed by how balanced it makes me feel. Cognitively, I'm sharper, I can work for longer periods of time, and I just generally have more energy. As a listener of the Think Grow podcast, you can get 15% off any 4 Sigmatic purchase by going to 4sigmatic.com/TGP. They've also been kind enough to set up a discount code for you guys. So just type in the letters TGP, as in Think Grow Prosper, at checkout, and you'll get 15% off your order. So again, that URL you want to visit for the discount is foursigmatic.com, all spelled out, /TGP. Or just use discount code TGP at checkout to get 15% off your order. And now, back to the show. So I have a question that popped into my head. What I guess, because there are a bunch of these paradigms that we may be consciously or unconsciously participating in. How do you identify which ones are the ones that are maybe holding you back and which ones are useful? Because presumably there are some useful paradigms. So how do you identify the ones that are not useful and then break out of those?
I think what it comes down to, for me, it's come down to, and I don't think I've identified all the things that I'm stuck inside. I'm not saying, I'm completely free and clear of these invisible structures. No, I think that one, just being aware that they exist and that you're inside of them is a big step in being able to choose. So you're not always going to be able to extract yourself from every belief system or every paradigm, but just being aware that these things exist is a big step up in terms of like your level of consciousness in humanity. Like if you look at Dr. David Hawkins' Power versus Force, he talks about levels of consciousness, and just being aware that these things exist is a huge step up. And then, I think that you have to start sitting with yourself in a lot of reflection and meditation and taking that time for yourself, because Stuart Wilde has this thing he calls TikTok, being in TikTok. The whole world is just operating on this like automatic clock of wake up, go to school, go to work, eat lunch, go to the gym, go to dinner. And we're operating so automatically that we don't take time to consider what we're doing. And I think that bringing it back and having time for reflection, doing meditation, journaling, other types of deep reflective work, you'll start to see where your own inconsistencies lie. You'll start to see the things that are causing you pain. And then you can take some time to analyze, what is this that's causing me to do this? And you'll find oftentimes that a lot of the things that cause you pain are things that you didn't bring upon yourself as much as things that you're playing into. And it takes time. And then so the third piece of this is, what's possible is what I say is possible. I am the stand I take. And then the third one is, there's no such thing as should or shouldn't. And so it's really painful for a lot of people to hear that, because there are a lot of things that we really think should or shouldn't happen, and we're very committed to those assessments. But if you're able to divorce yourself from that, a war is a great example. Literally half of the people in the war will say this shouldn't have happened, and another half will say it should. And there is no right answer to that. I remember that when I was in this would be like 10th grade, there was one student who was in one of my classes, and we were in advanced European history. We were talking about just like different wars that were happening in Europe in the medieval times and the Renaissance. And this girl was just sharing her beliefs about Christianity, and how it was obviously like the best religion, and how, that's why it's clear that the Crusades happened. And I, even at that time, before I'd done most of this type of work, I ended up thinking to myself, like, literally everyone who was a victim of the Crusades would disagree with you. So it almost nullifies your point, because there's just as many people who think the opposite. So who's to say that one belief is stronger or more valuable? It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's kind of like the saying, one country's freedom fighter is another country's terrorist.
Precisely. Precisely.
It's like, depending on the perspective that you're adopting, you can make the argument for both sides. But I guess one question I have is there some kind of transcendent or more fundamental truth there? I don't know. There's kind of a twinge of moral relativism here. I think that there are some things that maybe should happen and maybe shouldn't happen. Or am I just completely wrong about that?
It depends on how far you zoom out. Like, on one level, the processes in the body might even seem antagonistic. So like, let's say you have cancer and your cells are fighting each other, and the white blood cells and the immune system is fighting the cancer cells. And there's, on one level, on a microscopic level, it looks like there's like almost a war going on. But then if you were to zoom out one level and you were to see, you zoom out even a few levels and see the population as a whole, you might see that, well, things are actually working as they should work because a certain amount of people are being reabsorbed into the ground. The ground is literally feeding the earth. The trees are growing. It's providing oxygen for the new babies that are growing up. And those babies are growing up and they're doing great things. And of course, you zoom out even further and you say, well, we shouldn't, we're polluting the earth. But of course, the planet even has cycles of destruction and growth. And even when the planet explodes from the sun burning it to a crisp, there will be a point to that. It's just how far you zoom out.
Yeah, we have a very human consciousness, so we're very human centric in that sense that we judge things that are good or bad based on whether or not they're good or bad for us specifically. Whereas the universe may or may not care whether or not so anyway.
It's harsh to say that, but it's the reality. It doesn't care. But there's a difference between the universe being cruel and there's still to be from my perspective, a loving detachment of you are it. You didn't just drop here on the earth as a visitor or a stranger. You quite literally sprouted from the ground. The fact that you came out of your mother, where did your mom come from? She came from a long line of people who literally grew out of the earth. I mean, almost like if you see those claymation videos where people will they'll grow out of the material that they're made of. That's how we are created. As you know, we're made of the same materials that all the different organisms on Earth are made of. We're made of the same elements that the different celestial bodies are made of. We're quite literally constructed of those constituent parts. And we grew out of the earth from other beings who did just the same. So we didn't just show up here with our diaper and say, what do I do? We are part of this living organism. The earth isn't comprised of billions of separate organisms. The earth is an entire organism. Okay. It's one working organism, and your individual consciousness feels unique, but is part of a larger system that's working at a level that you can't really understand. And because it's so grand and so big, but if you really think about that, what happens to you individually doesn't really matter.
Have you read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I haven't read that one yet.
Oh, dude, it's a fiction book, which I've been reading a lot more lately, but it kind of has that same idea in it. The world is essentially a supercomputer program that is trying to calculate the meaning of life and everything. And it's all one organism. It's all one organic calculator, essentially.
That's true. And I have another one here too. This is a great one. The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. This is a... Yes.
Woo. Yeah, I read that. I read that a while back. That was a few years ago. That was really influential. That was a very interesting book. Yeah.
Hot and sexy. and if you read Dr. David Hawkins' The Power of Force, he talks about the concepts in there. Yeah, hot and sexy. But the Holographic Universe really will give you some more insight into this is not about you, and there is no should or shouldn't. So then, okay, so let's get a little bit more specific. So you have these invisible structures, you have paradigms. Now you have pendulums, and so pendulums are essentially invisible structures created by a group of people thinking and feeling the same way.
So we moved on from paradigms. Now we're on pendulums. Okay.
Yes, and this is basically this is the emotional structure. So they play on human emotions to gain energy and to trap people in the web, essentially. And I talk about pendulums as if they have a mind of their own, and sometimes it almost feels like they do. I don't think they're necessarily like evil or malevolent, but there is definitely an energy draining component of pendulums, and they can sometimes seem to take on a life of their own, like a mob mentality. What are some examples of pendulums? Pendulums like war, religion, politics, media, financial markets, public health, sports, social media, holidays, marketing in general. These are all things that create an emotional response, and that emotional response sways people in a direction that they wouldn't necessarily always go by themselves, and creates a need that they maybe didn't know that they had or didn't previously have, or also creates discontent or discomfort, or creates a sense of purpose. And these things can be used by people who are aware of them to drum up public support or to create discord, all these different things. I mean, the media is a great example of this. And it takes a lot of strength to be able to recognize what's happening here. So like, for instance, one of my favorite ones is like local news. Okay. So my mom will often call me, and I live in Venice, and Venice is kind of like the intersection of art and trash. Art and crime, where art and crime meet.
Okay.
And, but not really crime, just more like extreme hippieism.
Yeah. Loitering.
Loitering, and sometimes they pee on buildings. Okay. So, some people stink. So, but my mom will call me, and, she's like 2 hours away, 3 hours away in the desert. And she'd be like, I just saw on the local news that there was a stabbing in Venice. I'm like, well, she's like, are you okay? I'm like, well, I'm talking to you on the phone, so definitely okay. And stabbing in Venice, like, it doesn't really apply to me. It's not a specific thing. It's a general thing. It's like saying there was it's like saying there was a cleanup on aisle 7, but if you're on aisle 1, it doesn't matter. But what it does is it creates this emotional response. So like you look at local news, and there'll be like something in every household could be killing your kids. News at 11. So now it's 8 o'clock. You're thinking, crap, there's something I'm doing that's wrong. It's making you emotional. You stay up till 11, you watch it. And then the thing that you see either, excites you, or it's not even worth your time, but it's created this emotional response. And these pendulums are used to help us to make decisions that we wouldn't normally make. Another thing with like war, people sign up for war, and it tears countries apart. It tears families apart. Young men will watch really emotional commercials that the U.S. Army puts out. These commercials, they're so fucking good. I mean, they'll be like, the man on the mountain. I think there's like a Marine commercial. A man scaling a mountain, and he gets to the top, and he stabs his like gleaming silver sword down into the mountain, and all of a sudden his uniform morphs like a superhero, and out in front of him is this like beautiful vista, and like his whole family and his lineage is behind him, and they're hugging him, and they're wrapping him in an American flag, and he's smiling, and there's like a baby that's coming down, and there's like, then he's like smiling and going off to college because he's done his duty, and everyone's patting him on the back, and he's having like this vision, and you're watching this and thinking, oh my God, if I am involved with this is going to happen for me. And it creates an emotion inside of you. That emotion causes you to go to the recruiter's office. You go to the recruiter's office. A year later, you're in Iraq. You're literally riding the pendulum. And so we create we allow these scenarios to be created where we are swayed by public opinion back and forth. It's almost like when you look at the political system, politics is just a great obvious example of these pendulums. There really can be, and if you think about pendulums, they go back and forth. The ones that go on the desk, they go, you can't have one side without the other. So when one ball knocks the middle pin, the other ball comes and knocks it and continues the energy and contains the energy. The reason why, pick your side, Democrats or Republicans in the U.S., fight so hard is because the other side's fighting so hard, and they literally maintain the energy within themselves. And so anyway, these pendulums are, we can get caught so often in the public emotion around something that we don't take time to assess, what do I feel? Do I really have this belief? These beliefs are passed down. These beliefs carry emotion inside of them. The emotion controls us in a way where we don't often know why we're doing things or why we're even thinking these things, and we operate unconsciously. So we have to be able to move ourselves out of that unconscious pattern and say, is this really how I feel? Is this really, what I believe, or am I part of this pendulum that goes back and forth?
So not always being at the mercy of the pendulum effect of these outside forces that are acting on our emotions, but stepping outside of that and being more objective and just being mindful and just asking ourselves, hey, like how do I actually feel?
Correct. And one of the for the last few elections, I haven't voted, and I don't know if I'm going to vote in this next election. I'm not sure. For a while, I was I'm definitely not voting, and now I'm just like, I don't know. That's a whole different conversation. But the thing I've been saying around it is I haven't voted because when you vote, it just encourages them to keep running. What part of the idea around pendulums is like the more you participate in them, the more energy you give them, the more they operate with a very firm grip. I mean, and one good example of this in history is you can look at like someone like Muhammad Ali, and there's this great clip of him where he's essentially being chastised for not participating in the Vietnam War. And if you know about the Vietnam War, you know it was there is no should or shouldn't, but from the human perspective, it was a very unjust war, and we were basically just terrorizing, Southeast Asia. And basically Muhammad Ali, who was the heavyweight champion at the time, obviously a black man in the 60s, was drafted, and he's like, I'm not going. And so he was being criticized at a local college, and he says, I'm not going over to Vietnam to kill more black and brown people. If I'm going to die, I'll die fighting you right here today. It wasn't no Viet Cong ever called me nigger. No, it's basically, it's you're my oppressor when I want justice. You're my opposer when I want freedom, and that whole speech, Will Smith did a great job on that part in the movie. But like, that's him actively looking at the pendulum and saying, I'm not going to get wrapped in this emotion of patriotism because everyone says I should go to war and because everyone is so hyped up about this war. I'm going to think, what's right for me? I'm going to really make an assessment. Is this what Muhammad Ali wants to do? And unfortunately, when you go against the grain, oftentimes you're hit with a lot of public discontent. At the time, he was stripped of his title. He was given a suspended sentence. He never went to jail for that, but he was given a suspended sentence. He lost a lot of money. He lost a lot of his prime fighting years. And people called him all sorts of unpatriotic and loser and, all these different things. And but then come to find out years later, after the war passed and that emotional cloud had passed in the U.S., people said, wow, Muhammad, you're such a hero. You really stand up for yourself, But he just had the clarity to make that decision. And once everyone else's emotions had changed, then their minds changed because they were so wrapped up in that pendulum.
So are there like particular strategies that help you to be a little bit more emotionally stoic in that regard? Because it is, there are many things, especially in today's world, that act upon our emotions. Social media is the most obvious example too. It's like, it's engineered in a way that evokes distraction and all these emotional responses in us, and you see the most extreme opinions on social media too. So, is there a way that is useful for kind of becoming more emotionally stable, I guess?
Yeah. The first thing is just being able to step outside of that pendulum whenever possible, because there will be opportunities for you to step outside. So sometimes it's as obvious as the Ali move. You're like, I'm not going to participate in this. That could mean, simple things like, I don't watch the local news anymore, because if you watch the local news, it's only sensationalized garbage. Why would I want to look at what buildings are on fire or who got robbed? That only makes me emotionally down. It doesn't really give me any relevant information, but I'm watching it because, there's a paradigm. You should watch the news. You should get to know what's going on in your local community.
Should be informed.
You should be informed, right? Says who? According to who? And then when you get informed, you realize this is not really information. This is garbage. It's, if it bleeds, it leads. Go watch Jake Gyllenhaal's Nightcrawler, right? It's like they're just looking for things that are going to attract eyeballs. One is like knowing where those pendulums are and choosing to step outside of them, and recognizing the swing for what it is and just stepping away. And then the second thing is sometimes you won't be able to step away. Sometimes you're either too deeply in it, or it's too big of a movement where you can't step outside. So like some people would say, for instance, in Nazi Germany, if you're either a Jew or like an Aryan German during that time, they'd say, oh, well, just revolt, just, rebel. Well, possibly, but that was a huge pendulum that entire country and all of Europe really got sucked up in. And Adolf Hitler at that time was very aware, I don't think he used the same terms, but he was very aware of the fact that he was creating a stirring of emotion in that country by evoking the sensation that the German race was being essentially dealt a bad hand, and that, creating this triumphant vision of a master race, and then also using Jews and other minorities as a scapegoat to basically exercise the frustration on, and creating that emotional cycle and swirling it so everyone got caught up in this haze. So sometimes you won't be able to get out of that. Some people try as they might are going to be stuck in that. A simpler example could be maybe you're at work and you have changes going on and you can't just quit your job. There might be some things that you need to do in a new position that you don't want to do, and you're feeling emotional about it. And there's a turnover at work, and maybe people are getting laid off, and everyone's getting very emotional. You can look at that and say, I can't exit, but I'm going to remain vigilant in my decisions, and I'm going to essentially operate from a higher position of I'm going to do whatever actions are required of me right now, but I'm not going to completely rent myself out to the pendulum. I'm not going to give away my core heart and my core awareness. I'm going to, with every turn, be aware of what's happening and don't do anything that violates my integrity when at all possible, and also maintain my energy so that I don't let this thing suck my energy out. And then be able to help to try to wake others up as well in the process. So sometimes you can't fully leave, but you have to remain vigilant in that process. And that's why, like we were talking about, again, wielding the power and how do you begin to become more powerful? Well, part of it is sometimes you can't always snap your fingers and make magic happen, but it's just becoming aware of the fact that you're trapped inside of this structure and being able to not give yourself completely away to it that will allow you to maintain. It's almost like, Nelson Mandela, for all those years he was in prison, it's like he never completely gave away his soul to that situation. The slaves who were stuck in slavery, especially the ones who were able to then see to the other side of slavery, the people who've been in very tough situations, you don't give yourself completely away to the situation. You keep a kernel of yourself that maintains your level of consciousness, awareness, and integrity that no situation can take away from you.
Yeah, I love that. And to be clear, this isn't about being emotionless or having no emotion or looking at things completely rationally. I think it's partly, at least the way I understand it, is partly just having that awareness and being aware that there are outside forces acting upon your emotions and getting in touch with what your true emotions are, as opposed to letting yourself be swayed by other people's interests, let's say. And so I think that's maybe an important distinction, because you might hear this and be like, oh, we're supposed to be like an emotionless, person. Like, no, I don't think so, because Jonathan Haidt's done some really interesting research on this. It's like we actually can't reason if we don't have emotion. So reason and emotion go hand in hand to a degree, to a very large degree, in fact. But I think that is kind of, that's how I have interpreted what you've said. Am I in the ballpark?
You're definitely in the ballpark. Yeah, and I think Stoicism is a great philosophical track that plays well into the idea of like not letting your emotions get the best of you and realizing that emotions have their place. They can also lead you off track if you allow them to take the place of what you actually want. And that's kind of like the second layer of the structure. So it's like you have your belief structures with your paradigms, things that you should or shouldn't be doing. You have your pendulums, which are the emotional scapegoats that we use to basically blame for why we're acting the way we're acting, And then there's also just the programs. And programs are essentially, they revolve around environmental stimuli and obligations. These are the things that we're doing on a daily basis. These are the, quote, habits. Really, these are like the granular things that we're doing.
Got it. So this is the third invisible structure that holds us back. And so we moved from the very large kind of zoomed out paradigm. We zoomed in a little bit more to the pendulum, and now we're at the finer resolution program.
So one way to identify programs is like thinking of the phrase, whenever I do X, I Y. So like, whenever I wake up in the morning, I drink a cup of coffee. That's a program. Whenever I go to work, I take Lincoln Boulevard. That's a program. When I smoke or drink, after I have sex, I pass out. That's a program. And essentially, these are direct cause and effect relationships caused by or connected through the invisible thread of habit. So, we all have these habits. We wake up every day and we have the same habits. We go to the same meetings. We take the same routes to work. We have the same responses to people's, to the stimuli that is around us. And we're so invested in making these programs work for us and to maintaining these programs and to justify and continue to operate within them that we often don't even try to build new programs or to break the ones that we have. And a lot of times they also come with like perceived obligations. So a way this could be damaging is like, when the weekend comes around, I like to drink with my friends. That's like a perceived obligation, that a lot of us are stuck in. These are the things that we can really affect most directly on a day-to-day basis. And it's almost like you can work backwards. Like if you can work on your programming, which are your habits, then you'll have enough freed up energy to then look at the emotional things that are happening to you and work on the pendulums. And once you're not as emotional and back and forth, then you can look at your biggest belief structures and start to change those. And so you can start from the inside and work to the outside. And at every level of these invisible structures, when you're able to overcome or at least recognize them, you release energy. Like it releases energy, and it releases energy in terms of the fact that like you have more energy. You free up the energy you'd be using to maintain these invisible structures. And that free energy is energy you're allowed to put back into yourself, which is what we're talking about, which is becoming more powerful, which is allowing you to operate from a place of more strength, security, and confidence as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a creative. When you're able to take the energy back from these structures, you're able to use it in other places. We spend so much of our lives, like if we could look, like imagine you're in the pool and you have a beach ball and you hold it under the water, right? It's always wanting to come back up. Well, you can do that for one beach ball. What about two beach balls? Okay, I got two. I'm holding them under there. Now, what if you have 3, 4, 10 beach balls? You're trying to hold all those down underneath the surface of the water. Well, those are your beliefs, and those are your emotions, and those are your programs. Those are the things that are invisible. They're under the water, but it takes energy to hold those under there. Once we're no longer invested in having to use our energy to hold those things together, we can direct that energy to other things. We can go swimming. And it makes sense that we're kind of like, if you think about it, if you look at your day, it makes sense that we're creating the same actions because we're addicted to the loop of the way it's always gone. This is also another Dispenza thing. Like, and by the way, you can be addicted to something that you don't like or doesn't serve you. Smoking is a great example. Everyone wants to quit smoking. They don't quit smoking. Just knowing that you can be addicted to things that aren't serving you should make you look at your habits and look at your addictions and say, which of these things is not really helping me right now, and which of these things needs to be broken. So part of it is awareness and just having that awareness. So for me, that's why I took the rest of the year off of THC and psychedelics, which I think THC is oftentimes really a psychedelic, just to get myself completely clean and completely clear, because I've done so much plant medicine. And then for a while, I was doing the cannabis column at LA Weekly, and they gave me so much free marijuana. It's just like, wow, I was just completely overloaded. And one day I looked in my like I have like a medicine box, and I looked in my box, and I had a bunch of weed in there. I had LSD, DMT, and Molly. And I thought to myself, okay. And I had like a good quantity of all of that. I was like, all right, I don't need to have all this. And so, it's getting out of hand. And so like, you can use those things in ceremony, and I think they're powerful, really effective tools, but like too much access, too much use. And I had to say, okay, I need some awareness around this. So that's the first thing. And then outside of just awareness around the things that are addictive to you, or the things that are maybe not serving you, but you're still stuck on a loop, really, you can just change that habit by doing the Charles Duhigg, cue, routine, reward. So Charles Duhigg has a great book called The Power of Habit. And he gives the example of, you want to go out for a run in the morning, but you hate running. So the first thing is you got to have a cue for it. So you have to be able to put your running shoes and your running shorts at the end of the bed. So when you see it in the morning, you wake up and you see it. That's your cue. You put those shoes on. You do the routine. Okay. So because you've seen the shorts and the shoes, you can't just walk past them like it's a cue. You go do your routine. You go for your run. And then after that routine, you give yourself a reward. He talks in the book about giving himself like a piece of dark chocolate or a little cookie. And it's not because you want the chocolate as much as you want your brain to link up the reward with the routine and the routine with the cue. And so you're actually literally installing new habits. If you think about it, all the habits that you have, all the programs that you have had some sort of cue, routine, reward structure set in place, even if you didn't know it. So every day you come home, the cue is you had a long day at work and it's now 9:00. The routine is you're going to go into the pantry and you're going to get a bag of Tostitos. And the reward is you're going to sit down and watch TV as you slam an entire bag of Tostitos and guacamole. And then the next day you wake up and say, oh, crap, I just ate another bag of Tostitos again. I didn't want to do that. Well, you literally ingrained the habit by linking that cue, routine, and reward together. So you have to understand those pieces, understand how you're doing that in your day-to-day life, and break those apart, and then install positive habits using the same psychology that your brain used to install negative habits.
I love that. So that's the third piece there, is rewiring your brain to have different habits, basically, and to be triggered by different things. Cue, routine, reward. Yeah, I love that book, by the way. That was a powerful book.
It's a great book. It's a game changer.
This has been really helpful, man. So as a common thread, I know you have to go here soon, so I'll wrap this up. But the common thread, I think the underlying kind of meta principle here is pay attention to, like, you're paying attention to the paradigms that you're a part of. You're paying attention to the external forces that are causing you to have that pendulum effect with your emotions. And then you're paying attention to the programs that you're at the mercy of, let's say. And so that's a useful thing to know. And I've been writing about that. So that's pay attention is like wrapped up in a lot of these really deep truths. It's a truth it's a principle that manifests in a lot of different ways, or that expresses itself in a lot of different ways. And so it's useful to see that this framework also kind of lends itself to paying attention as well.
Yes, that's a great comment there. It is paying attention. It is awareness. It is being more vigilant as well, not allowing yourself to constantly slip into the lull of just living on autopilot. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm not really aware, I can let a whole week pass by and not really have any clear defining moments or awareness around those days, and the weeks can melt.
Absolutely, man. I can relate to that heavy. Like if I don't have something as simple as a structure, as a daily routine that I strive for, I will at the end of the week feel very depressed and not know why. And only when my wife reminds me, hey, you've been kind of unstructured, like you haven't really had the routine that you've had, and I'm not paying attention to what it is that I'm doing, where my energy is going during the day. Yes. Only when she reminds me of that am I like, oh, damn. And then I snap out of it. Like, damn it.
Yes.
You're right. And so it is very important to be vigilant and to always be on top of pay attention to what you're doing, pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Also,
yes, whoa.
And I got that from Austin Kleon, wrote a new book. I just had him on the podcast, and that's one of his lines in his book. It's like, pay attention to what you pay attention to, and he uses it in an artistic context, but it's very important also just from a behavioral context. Like, what is it that your energy is focused on? So.
Yeah, and imagine going for a whole decade without paying attention. What types of results will that get to you? You're not going to be happy.
Yeah, you become unconscious. Daniel, I appreciate it, man. I wish we could talk more. We should do more frequent conversations. I think it's been like a year since I've had you on the podcast. I feel like Joe Rogan has his friends on much more frequently than that.
Well,
so why can't I have you on more frequently?
My offer to you is we rebranded the Rich 20 podcast as the Daniel DiPiazza Show, and our first 5 episodes under that moniker just came out, and I would love to have you on my show.
Oh, damn. That'd be awesome, man.
Which I think I've already extended the offer off a bunch of times, and then you rejected it, and now you want to do it.
That's a lie. I didn't even know that you had a new that you rebranded the podcast. I had no idea. I thought you stopped doing it.
Well, no, the Rich 20 Show, and I was like, remember, that was like years ago, though, so I forgive you.
Oh, yeah, back in the day. You're right about that. You know what? I want to publicly apologize
It's okay.
for being flaky.
No, I forgive. And no, I really do want you on the show, so we'll schedule it.
I love it, man. Dude, thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.
Much love, my brother.
Hey, thanks for listening. You can find the show notes for this episode and all other episodes on my website at thinkgrowprosper.com/podcast. That's where I put all the links and resources mentioned in each episode. It's also where I put the outlines of topics covered, which is a really good way to refer back to episodes in the future. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to leave a review on iTunes with your biggest takeaway. I make it a point to read all the reviews. You can also screenshot this episode and share it to your social media along with something you learned or found interesting. And tag me in your post because I'd love to see what you found interesting. Say hi and thank you for your support.